I'd like to welcome Doug Beitz, who is the host of a popular podcast, Intuitive Conversations with Doug, where his focus is helping men understand why developing their intuition is so important and how to develop it. He believes when men learn to tap into the sixth sense, they not only transform their own lives, but help create a better world for everyone. His curiosity led him around the world, learning the art of clearing energy in people and places, and eventually becoming a certified intuitive life coach. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you, JD. That's yeah, nice intro. Thank you.
Yes, I just love what you're doing because you know, I want people to know that you exist and that you're highlighting the importance and I want to honor the message that men are equally as intuitive and that intuition is for everyone. So yeah, I would love to hear more about your story and what really inspired you to start this podcast.
Yeah, well, I didn't always think this way that intuition was for men, I can tell you, because my we've got four sons, and I remember when the first two were born fairly close together. When they were 3 or 4, my wife would always say to them, "Don't you ever lie to mummy, because I know exactly what you're thinking." And those boys are in their 30s now, and if you ask them, they go, "Oh yeah, mum knew exactly what we were up to." And so I always just thought it was a ladies' thing,
Mm.
and women had intuition, men had muscles. Like it's just that's just how life was. And then in the intro, you mentioned there about me learning energy clearing. And when I went to that course, the first course I went to was I flew to California, went for 5 days. And right at the intro, the lady running it, Jean Hayner, she warned us. She said, "This 5 days is going to be life changing, transforming, and all this stuff's going to happen." And we only had we had a morning session for like 2 hours, an afternoon session for an hour and a half, and an evening session for an hour and a half. And I'd flown halfway around the world, and I'm thinking, this is pretty light on. Like this, we should be running all day. Like this should be like a 10-hour thing, like 5 days a week. But she would, and after the afternoon session, she said to us, "Go back to your room and have a nap." And we're like, "What?" We were in this beautiful redwood forest, and anyway, she was right. Like it, absolute life changing. I found myself in tears through the thing, like which was very out of character for me. But what I noticed when I left that and came back to the real world is I had was receiving intuitive messages, but I couldn't interpret them. And she was right. Life had changed. Things were crazy. On the flight home, LAX to Brisbane here in Australia, flight left about 10, 11 p.m. So I watched a couple of movies. I'm crying in the movie, and I'm always like giggling at my wife because she's the movie crier. Now I'm crying, and I'm like, what the heck's I'm glad it's dark and no one can see. Next movie comes on, I start crying again, and I'm like, what is happening to me? So fast forward, then I start going through the years, and I'm getting physical sensations in my body. I'm getting all sorts of things. I know I'm getting messages, and I scream out to the universe driving in my car one day, not aggressive, very forcefully, not angry, but very emotionally. Send me someone to teach me the language of my intuition because I don't get it. And 2 days later, that person magically appeared. And it was funny, like it was going to cost me a heck of a lot of money to follow this person. And I went for a surf early in the morning, about 7 a.m., and there's no one on the beach for like hundreds of yards in either direction. I look, there's no one. And the waves were small. They were like 2 feet, like tiny little waves. So I go out for a swim. I catch a couple of waves in, and I'm thinking, and it's in my mind the whole time. The universe is just saying, "We've dropped this person in front of you. Pull the trigger." Like you screamed out for it. We've given it to you ASAP. Do it. And then I catch another little wave in, and I'm sort of hesitating in my mind. I catch another little wave in, and next thing, this tiny wave picks my legs up, pushes me head first into the sand. I hear my neck crack, And I'm like, oh my God, I thought I'm going to be like in a wheelchair, like it. And I like, what is going on? And I sort of stand up and I'm like, I can actually stand, my neck's not broken. And it was like, I just thinking, I've got it. Like the universe is really going overtime on me here. Like I got away with this. Like I got a get out of jail free card, but I got a real warning. So I just got my car, drove straight home, and just messaged the people and said, "Yeah, I'm in. I'm joining into this thing." And so I spent the next year then developing my intuition a whole lot, and then it just sort of during that year I started the podcast because my sons for years had been telling me to start a podcast. And I was like, what is a podcast? Why would I want to do that? And they're like, Dad, you love talking to people. Like, just find random people and ask if you can record conversations with them and put them on a podcast. And that's not what when I started it, I was quite purposeful on what I did. But they'd been, I think the universe had been putting the seed into my head through a couple of them, and then it just sort of evolved into and in this class of 30 plus people that were in these online live Zoom calls, I was the only guy. And they were telling me, you got a niche down. And I'm thinking, well, here we go. Like, here's my niche, men and intuition. And sometimes I often think, Jody, I'm way ahead of my time. I think I'm either months ahead, years ahead, or centuries ahead. Eventually, the men will get it. But someone's got to blaze the trail and, set things up because I realize now I've had some serious synchronistic moments in my life that I've recognized and followed. I've had some very minor ones that I've followed and got some nice little gentle benefits, but I've followed some massive ones where if it had gone wrong, I could have looked like the biggest fool on the planet, or in my mind anyway. And I chose to follow them, and the rewards from them were just like mind-boggling. Like I know, like, and this was before I did any of the intuition classes. I look back now and I realized that I did recognize the synchronicities. I knew something was going on, and it's phenomenal. I mean, there's a whole lot more to the story than that of reasons why I targeted men, but yeah.
Yeah, well, there's so many aspects of just what you said I want to touch on. One is how I like how you said, yeah, I just love talking to people. And before um, recording, I was listening to your podcast, and up to time of this recording, you have like 160 some podcasts, and I was looking at some podcasts. Um, um, but your earlier podcast, and one was with someone I know in Canada, Elvin Law.
Oh, Alvin. Yeah, he's in my men's group. He's the best guy out.
Really? But that
Yeah.
is just so crazy to me because, like, I just saw him. I'm from a small town in Saskatchewan in Canada, and I grew up going to this, like, the family cabin in a small lake. And I was just walking around the lake. Actually, intuitively, I was like, you need to go for a walk this morning. And I was intuitively walking. I ran into him this summer. That's a whole other coincidence of me just getting back home this summer. I ran into him. I haven't seen him in years. I grew up with hanging out with his son, Vance. And part of the beginning of his podcast was all about how he prides himself in being the most amazing driver. And I
Yep.
confirm, because he would always drive us skiing, like in the boat, and he was always the best driver. Like, I did not, like my grandpa, my dad, my uncles, like they always were like, yeah, it was always Alvin who was the best driver to take us for a ski. So it's like, yes, I can confirm exactly what he's saying. But it just reminded me of, like, my gosh, you're in Australia. Like, I'm in Canada. I was introduced by someone we know mutually in the States. And it just reminds me, like, how interconnected, like, the world is so small. And just how, when we're supposed to meet people, we will. And when we're supposed to run into people again, We will. And I just love that. And you just reminded me of that interconnectedness.
Yeah, that's cool. Because yeah, and when you say like Alvin's at the lake, his summer cabin, like because he was quite happy and chirpy because he goes, guys, I'm going to be here we have a meeting every on Zoom every couple of weeks. He goes, the next few weeks I'll be here no matter what, because he when he's traveling he misses his talking or something and can't join in, because and he's got his little camera in his toes and he's flicking his iPad around showing us the lake and all that sort of stuff, and toes half on the screen. And he is a classic guy on, and yeah, he brings a really wonderful energy to the group. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're also saying like, so is this group like a men's circle?
What it is, how it started is I was getting frustrated not having men to have deep and meaningful conversations with, except on my podcast.
Mm.
And so probably more than 18 months ago, put the word out to select men who'd been on my podcast. So that's how you get into the group, is you're a man and you've been on my podcast, and I choose to let you know about the group. And so it's very handpicked by me. And so now I've got this group of men, and I send about invitation out to about 30 men each couple of weeks, and usually sort of anything between 3 or 4, maybe 8 are available, and we come on Zoom for an hour and we talk about stuff. And so yeah, that's how that sort of started. So it satisfies. It's very selfish on my part. I now have men who are willing to have deep and meaningful conversations with, and we bounce stuff off each other, and a wide variety of people, I can tell you. So yeah, that's a little side benefit of the podcast.
Well, I love that. I have a friend I remember, like he's in his 30s and he once asked me, he's part of a men's circle and where they can have a safe place to be vulnerable. And he asked me one day, he goes, oh, I want to start a men's circle. He's like, oh, but do you think I should? Do you think there'd be too many? And my initial reaction was, no, I think there needs to be a men's circle at every corner of the city. Like this needs to be a normal thing, especially especially for men. Like I'm in a women's circle and it's naturally more easy. I think I'm overgeneralizing, but for women to open up, to share, to give compliments. But men, just from what I observe and with my male friendships, it's like they have a harder time to be able to connect with other men, to really be vulnerable and open and I just think this needs to be normalized, that men come together. Like our ancestors, we would hang around at night around the fire, sharing stories and supporting one another. And now we live in isolation, which is not, which is not normal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's and men need it for a different reason that women need it. Like 35 years ago, I heard the saying, most men lead lives of quiet desperation.
Mm,
And I just instantly thought of my father. He was just, and I didn't realize at the time, I didn't realize until his funeral, when his younger brother, and dad lived to 92, but his younger brother, who was 90, then told us a few stories at the funeral about what they'd gone through and a few different things with their mum dying when they were young boys and stuff like that. And you started to realize and put things together, like, and you're thinking, oh wow, like, and then when dad was in his 40s, his hearing went very badly. So even at work, he wouldn't eat lunch with the other men because he couldn't. They'd be talking to him and he couldn't hear them or understand them, and it got very embarrassing. So he would sit in his car and eat his lunch. And so he got very antisocial. And when we'd have a family gathering, he'd sit, he'd eat the meal, and then just get up and leave the room because there'd be 10 of us there and we're all laughing, and he couldn't understand a thing. So I started to realize that, that isolation and that people, and men, my dad literally tried to drink himself to death for the last 20 years. And I think lung cancer got him in the end. But the alcohol, he was drinking ridiculous amounts of alcohol. And yeah, so men need these sort of things, other men to bounce things off. And that's why 9 out of 10 of my podcast guests are male. And when I probably about episode 30 or 40, I decided that's how I wanted it to be. And prior to that, 4 out of 5 of my guests were female because it was so easy to find women who wanted to talk about this subject. And so since then, it's like I'm working hard to find men. I'm searching all over the place all the time to find men who, and occasionally I interview men who do not, they don't even know what intuition is, but I have observed them on YouTube videos or elsewhere, and I can observe them using intuition. And so I contact them, and some of them like contact me back, say, yeah, sure, let's have a bit of a chat and see what we think. And then we have a chat, and then, I program the podcast later. And at the end of the podcast, I've actually, or through the podcast, I've pointed out to them how they're using intuition. And at the end of it, they're like, you're right. Without knowing it, I actually do use my intuition for decisions. And, so that's where I'm tapping into a wide variety. And some men, like one guy I had, he'd been a psychic for 40 years. It's just very obvious that's what he does for a living. So anywhere in between. So yeah.
Wow. And so that's fascinating to me. So what do these men call it if they're not calling it intuition? Like you see something in them and you
Mhm.
pointed out examples, but how would they describe it themselves, what they were experiencing?
I guess they're just following a hunch.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like one guy, he'd had a more than 20-year career in the military, and his wife was in the military as well. And they suddenly had 2 young boys under 5, and they weren't happy with childcare and all this sort of stuff. So they decided one of them needed to stay home with the kids. So he said he was fairly high ranking, but he said my wife was more ambitious than I. So he resigned from the army, to much like distress from his army mates, and he decided to be the home dad. Um, 12, 15 years later now, he's got well over 1 million YouTube followers, and he's a gardener, and he's outside in the garden. And he actually he reminds me, do you remember Steve Irwin?
Yes.
Okay. So he lives like within 20 miles of where Steve's Australia Zoo is. And he's a little bit like that on his YouTube videos. He's got his puts his when I had him on the call, he was really straight. But he puts on little Aussie accent, and a heap of his followers are in North America. And he's doing really, really well. But he's just the gardening guy, and he talks about gardening. But my wife, she watches him, and because he's very entertaining, and he has really good home gardening tips. He's got like 2 or 3 acres, and nothing's pristine. It's real. Everything is real. But he talks about eating well, like eating healthy, and all this sort of stuff. And Jody, that's how my intuition initially came online. I was 47 years old, and I won't go into that story, but why that age was very specific, because just another story about, not about intuition. But so at 47, I was absolutely sick and tired of eating the food I was eating. We were living on a tiny little island near the equator, and we only had one. The ship came every 6 weeks. We had a restaurant and a hotel and scuba dive business. And so we would order our food 6 weeks ahead, and it would come from a single supplier in California. And we had no choice of where to get our frozen or dry food. And the frozen food sucked. Like the meat and the chicken was the lowest quality that you could. To me, it was the lowest quality that was around. I don't know, you might have been able to get worse somewhere else, but we had no option because we didn't order complete container loads. We had to share the container with the local stores on the island, and they wanted whatever was the cheapest. And I got turned right off, and I was just like, I said to my wife, I'm getting sick of this food. And anyway, a book came across my path serendipitously, and it helped me change what I was putting into my body, like long term. And months after that, my view of the world changed. I started to see things differently because I was changing the frequency of the food that was going into my body, and it started to change the frequency. It didn't happen in a week or two. It took 2 or 3 months. And in that same time, I did not think I was overweight, but just without trying to lose weight, changing what I was eating, I lost 25 pounds in 2.5 months by accident. And it was like, whoa. The next time, it was funny. We didn't leave the island a whole lot. And, it was right 600 kilometers north of the equator. So it was board shorts, t-shirt, and flip-flops. That's all we ever wore. So the next time, a couple of months later, I'm off to either Las Vegas or Florida for a scuba dive show to promote our business. And the first thing I have to do when I arrive is basically go straight to the mall and go to the shop and buy new clothes, because I was in size 36 jeans. Now I'm in size 32. And I've got my belt done up ridiculously tight with a loose shirt hanging out over the top. And I had to buy some clothes that fitted me. It was, but that was a beginning of life change. That was about 14 years ago. That really started changing my life, where it was headed.
Yeah, I remember watching that YouTube video. And coincidentally, I'm actually working on a new book that's called Intuitive Eating, and really helping people connect to the vibration of food, because I'm like that too. And my journey was about 14 years ago too, when I started silent meditation retreats. They had just like vegetarian. And before that, I came in like eating, you know, cake for supper. And then I came into this meditation retreat really with healthy, organic food for the first time. And it really affected my mood. Like my mood and energy drastically changed. And even now, sometimes, like, well, I'm kind of shifting, I'm hopefully shifting, but back in the day, if I was almost feeling like I was vibrating or too high or too happy or too, I wasn't used to that vibration. And I would consciously bring myself down. Like I don't I don't drink alcohol or do drugs or any of these things, but I would consciously decrease my energy, maybe subconsciously. Now I call it consciously because I'm conscious. I'm aware of my habit patterns. I would take sugar. I would eat chocolate. And then I would, boom, my energy would automatically decrease and I would go back into my body again. And it's like, oh, interesting. Like I still tend to go for sugar at times to bring my energy back down into my body. It's like such a grounding thing, but not positive. I'm not advocating for this. I'm saying, oh, I'm noticing my habit patterns, that if I'm almost too light, it's like, oh, I try to bring myself back. So I don't know. I have to just learn to accept feeling good all the time. I don't need to be in a habit pattern of bringing myself back down to earth as much. Yeah.
Yeah. Prior to that time, I was a chocoholic. I used to tell people, in my first 47 years, I had the equivalent of 5 lifetimes of sugar. I was just ridiculous with like cookies and cake and chocolate. Yeah. And I just went cold turkey on it. But I still had a sweet tooth, and I still do have a sweet tooth. So fortunately for me, in the book I read, it had some snack things, like to put together. And so I now, for the last 14 years, probably once a week, make one of these particular snacks and I take it with me, around. For the first 10 years, I literally, if I traveled overseas, I would make a big batch of it and put it in like big lunch boxes in my suitcase, so that when I arrived where I was going, I had comfort food. Because, you go to another country, it's challenging to get things that you like. You can't get the brand, you can't get this. And so I have my little, and it's sweet, but it's much more healthy than what I had been eating for sweets. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's also just like reframing too. I went to Morocco for the first time this year and fell in love with Moroccan dates. And so now I come home and I reframe that and I'm like, these are caramels. And so I eat them as dessert, and I say, I'm going to have a caramel now instead of having an actual caramel. And yeah, to really continue to live because my body vibrates very different. My frequency is very different by the foods I eat. And I really like how you talk about that. But Today, my main theme and my curiosity more is about men because I just think like I just would love, I've always wished I could just be a fly on the wall to men's circles because as a woman, I naturally want to connect with authentic, real, what's another word? Intuitively aware, connected men. And I don't know. It's my experience is they may tend to have a mask on, or they may have more ego, or I don't always see them in that raw form as maybe you are privy to and being in a men's circle. So I just think what like that I just hearing about men in men's circles gives me hope for humanity because I want more men to feel connected and supported. Um, like women, like we do, you know. Every month I connect to a circle of women and we really support each other. And I feel sad that not everyone, well, not all women have this, but especially men.
Mm. And you know the saying, JD, hurt people hurt people. You know,
Yes.
like that. And so for me, I realize now in my younger years, I was probably quite a tender, innocent young man. And I joined the fire service. I became a professional firefighter at 19. And I was the youngest guy in my intake. You know, we had a 4 month training course and all this sort of stuff. And at 19, I go on shift as, you know, I've now just graduated and I'm on the trucks. And obviously, everyone was older than me. And it was 100% boys' club back in those days. There were no female firefighters 40 years ago. And or where we lived anyway. Um, and so, you know, some of the guys were super nice and just really helpful, and some of them weren't. And there was a group of guys that I actually became, without realizing it, I was afraid of them. I didn't like, they were hurt, and really they were hurt guys, and they hurt people. They deliberately went out, and not just they would attack me, they would attack other people who they thought were vulnerable. So what I've started to realize now is if men can tap into their intuition and make just one better decision a day, every day of their life, because see, I look at intuition is different to everybody, and my interpretation on it is, and I don't expect anyone else to believe what I believe, but for me, there are invisible, benevolent forces out there, call them whatever you want, who love us and are constantly trying to get information to us to help us make our lives easier, better, and information to us to help us make other people's lives easier and better. And if men could start to make one better decision a day, within 3 months, like imagine every man on the planet now, from now on, is going to make a better decision, a wiser decision every day. In 3 months, the planet would be radically different because men would not feel so inferior, so they wouldn't be leading lives as quiet desperation. They'd feel better about themselves. And when you feel better about yourself, you treat other people better. You don't kick the cat as often. You don't yell at the kids. When I was a young boy, my dad would come home on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night from the local bar. And when I was 5, I used to love hearing Dad's car come in the driveway because on Friday night he got paid and he would bring home like candy and soda and all that sort of stuff for us kids. And at 5, it was just a delight. And occasionally he'd come in and come in the door a bit drunk and he'd go, "Oh, I forgot the stuff." And I was the baby by a long way. I was actually kind of a mistake. Like I was 6 years younger than my 4 older siblings. So he'd say to me, "Dougie, you come with me, you can pick everything for the other kids." So I got to go, and the shop was only a couple of 100 meters down the road. So we'd drive back down there and I'd go around and pick things and we'd come back and it was great. But as the years started to go on, my dad was 6 foot tall, mum was 4 foot 10, but she was Italian and she didn't let her size, you know, and mum always had gone to church and dad used to drink and smoke. So often when he'd walk in the door, she'd challenge him. you spending all our money down the pub again? Like, rah, 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 and it'd start to be on. So as the years went on, I started to not like the sound of my dad's car come in the driveway. We would literally hold our breaths, and he'd walk in the door. And the best we could hope for, JD, was that he'd walk straight into the bedroom and collapse on the bed and go to sleep. And we would go, oh, thank, jeez. Now, he never got physical with us, but it was always verbal, and the vibe was extremely unhealthy, I can tell you. So that's when I heard that term, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. I'm like, that's why I just instantly thought of my dad. And since he's passed, I've had major revelations about him in very deep meditation, where I've seen a radically different side of him. And he fulfilled the life he was supposed to fulfill for various reasons. And he was extremely helpful to me. And that's another whole story. But so, yeah, getting back to these guys now at the fire station, the handful of them who were nasty pricks, just to be honest. But I realize now through developing my intuition, I can see another side of them. And I could now walk up to those same guys. And if they started to attempt to tease me or be nasty to me, how they used to do it 30, 40 years ago, I would sort of just stand there and grin at them and just think, you poor bugger, you still got that pain inside you and you're trying to mask it. You're trying to put out this persona of strength, and inside you're a hurting little boy. I can see that now through my intuitive growth in life. It's helped me take my blinkers off and see people in a very different light. So not only am I feeling better about myself because I can make better decisions, like I sort of think this incarnation for me, like I believe, and I don't ask anyone else to believe that we've had previous lives or we'll have future lives, but I believe it. But I believe some of those other lives were really tough. And this one now I'm on easy street. Like it's just like, Doug, your next one, you get to rest, buddy. Like this is going to be easy. Because it's just, I look at my life now and I'm like, this is just magical. It's so good. Um, but part of that is because I see the world differently now through different lenses, different eyes. Because my intuition's there, I understand things so differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny that you're talking about past life, because actually, like just before this call this afternoon for me, and for the last 2 weeks, I've been consciously uncovering my past lives through these past life regression therapy, hypnosis, meditations that I kind of created for myself, and it's like, yeah, I feel like in I don't know how many past lives I might have been silenced for speaking things like this, and in this lifetime I'm like, oh no, I will not be silent. Like I will speak my truth, I will write, I will do podcasts, I will, and it's like I am safe in this lifetime to do that. And so I'm very much like, no, I'm not going to waste a life by being silenced again. um yeah.
Mm.
So, even you talking about all these firemen, this is an interesting job. Okay, all these firemen who may not even use the word intuition, and that's the thing. It's like I don't want people to get stuck on labels. It's like gut feeling, or whatever you guys want to call it. It's perfect. But I feel like a job like this, where you are in life or death situation, you're in just like emergency. You need to make gut instinct decisions. I just feel like a job like this, you need to be really tapped into your intuition.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. You do. And the problem with it is in the developed world, firefighters spend 3% of their working time at emergencies. So it's challenging because it's not like a normal job, if you're a barista making coffee, you make, 500 cups of coffee a day or whatever you do. And actually, that, I don't know if you guys would relate to that one. Here in Australia, our coffee is quite different when we go out to North America. I know you're in Canada, not the US, but when I've been to US, most of the time it's just brewed coffee. Our
Hmm.
our our baristas here, they have different machinery, and it's sort of more Italian type, and it's an art form. But they might make 500 cups of coffee in a day, like very artfully, and put little fancy designs on the top of it and everything. They're artists. Um, when you only do your art 3% of your working time, it even becomes more challenging to be on the ball, be switched on, and very necessary to, because the rest of the time you're supposed to be training, practicing. But as the years go on, that gets kind of boring, pretending, you know, that something's happening. So yeah, but you go into those situations like that, you definitely want your intuition, to know, particularly if you're in charge and you make a call and someone starts to challenge the call for various reasons. You better know, like, have they got their intuition switched on more than me? Because they're going like, oh, I'm not doing that. Or maybe we need to rethink this. And, yeah. And one of the best guys, that I know, who can handle a major emergency. There's 8, 10 fire engines turned up. It's hit the fan major. This thing's going to go for hours. He was mentored by his father. As a boy, his parents split and he lived with his mum. And then his dad was a firefighter. So he decided to become a firefighter. And they both were working on the same shift at different stations, but they were the closest station to each other. And they were in a bit of a remote area. So it was a lower socioeconomic area, and they would get big factory fires at 2 o'clock in the morning. And they'd both pull up for coming from different stations. And my friend, he was a lot younger. He was in his mid-20s, just become in charge of the truck. He joined when he was quite young as well. And he'd get there and he'd go, "Oh, Dad, what are we going to do?" And his dad would go, "Boy, we ain't going to panic." And his dad, this is back in the day, would pull out a little pouch of tobacco with a cigarette paper, and he'd stick the cigarette paper on his lip, and he'd start rolling the tobacco to make a smoke. And he'd say, "Boy, let's go for a walk." And they'd do a lap of this massive big factory that was on fire. The guys in the truck, the other firefighters, were starting to get water ready and things. And they'd do a walk around. His dad would be rolling this smoke, lighting up the smoke, and walking around. He'd say, "Okay, see that there? See, we've got smoke coming out of there. We've got this happening here." And his dad just slowed everything down. So, and just wisely could pick all the things, and he mentored his son up fire after fire. And then I never worked with his dad, unfortunately, but I worked with this guy, and he was just a master at things like that. And he would then, bring in past knowledge, but he would bring in intuition as well. And just yeah. But I've very much worked under the opposite of that as well, where people were definitely not calm, definitely not allowing intuition to flow through, because in those states of anxiety, I think the frequency we're putting out is like just this raw static that is keeping the intuition away. Like it's not allowing it to flow in. The frequencies are so different that the intuition's there. It's trying to help you, but you're not letting it in. And and now 2 days a week, I work as a fire safety advisor for a private company. So I'm constantly in businesses all over the area where I live, teaching the staff how to manage emergencies. And part of it, I'm teaching them breathing and all sorts of things, because I take them through, picture paints, or let's say if you can help people visualize things. So I go through and I describe emergency situations to them in the room, and I ham it up a bit. And I've practiced voice tones and all sorts of things, and I get people emotional. I had one guy in the room one day, he goes, "You've just triggered me." And that was just from me talking. Because I'm having them imagine emergency scenarios, and go through the whole things. And I teach them about breathing. And I think as we breathe, it regulates our frequency and changes it back down so it's more aligned to hear messages from benevolent, invisible forces who love us. Hence, our intuition's able to come through when we can control our breathing. Because I've had a neuroscientist on here who was just a steak on the plate lady. She wasn't into woo-woo intuition or anything like that. But I asked her, like, all about breathing and people who are anxious or have tunnel vision and all that sort of thing. And she told me the science of what happens and how it works and what happens when we breathe correctly and what happens when we breathe incorrectly. And yeah, so yeah.
I love that you're bringing up the topic of breathing. The moment you said slow down, when you said slow down, I just naturally took a deep breath. It was just like, oh, is this reminder of like, yes, I need to just stop and breathe. I had a guest. I was offering wellness retreats for a few years, and I had a recent guest, and she said she had this spiritual awakening a year ago. She was this like scientist before that, and she said, by learning to breathe, my life completely changed. And this was already like I offer coaching. I know you do this intuitive coaching. I want to talk about that. I offer coaching and help people reframe and help them have confidence in their intuition, because I don't say it's a gift. I think we all have it, men and women. That's why I'm always saying this on my podcast. Like, it's for everyone. And for her, she just learned in the last year the importance of breath, and it completely changed her life. So she's still incorporating that bit of knowledge into her awareness. So she wasn't even open to any more coaching or anything else from my retreat at all, because just that notion completely changed her life. And so when you were saying, you also said you're an intuitive coach. And so tell me more. Tell me more about that. What is it, and how do you define being an intuitive coach?
Well, the reason I started to become one was literally just to develop my intuition. Like I wasn't running around looking to become a life coach. I was just like, and I started to look into this, and I'm thinking I'm going to be, because half of what they was teaching was intuition development. So I started doing the classes, and then they started on Zoom. They started putting us together in pairs, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to enjoy this, but anyway, and I'm obviously paired each time with a woman. And after my first go, like we were, I think we just had to coach the other person for 10 minutes, and then they had us for 10 minutes. And the lady, as soon as we got in they broke us into breakout groups, and there's just the pair of us in the Zoom group. She just said to me straight up, she goes, I'm not confident to coach at all. You're going to have to do the whole 20 minutes. And I went, oh, okay. And we started, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. And it was just like, and 20 minutes went just like that. It was just like, whoa. And I was so thankful that the universe put me in this group with her, because I got to like get double the amount of time in the very first time. And it was just like, this is so good. I'm enjoying this so much. And, but coaching is quite simple. Like I can remember, like, because most of it is on Zoom. But I remember my first in person, like a guy came to my house, and he said to me, like, his wife was pretty keen for him to sort things out or whatever. And after about the third session, he said to me, my wife's saying to me, what does Doug say? What does Doug say to you? And he goes, you know what? Doug doesn't actually say that much. And I'm thinking, well, oh, I'm glad you said that, because that's what I was taught, like it, because I actually don't know their answers. They know their answers. But it's like, well, why would you as the coach need intuition? Because sometimes they need some prompting. And, like this group of 30 ladies I was on these Zoom calls with 3 or 4 days a week, they were widely varied. Like we had some ladies on there. I loved all of them, but they were just off the planet. Some of them were like, and when I say that, off my planet, like just I was not used to some of the stuff they were like into, like, and every one of them were radically different. And I just came along with my little energy clearing background, and they were great. They loved that. And I'd get them in groups and we'd go off and do that. But yeah, like I found for me, and it was funny because our instructor, she said, when you get an intuitive hit, you need to say to the client, I've just get this feeling, this bit of intuition. Do you mind if I share it with you? Well, Jody, I didn't get it like that. I didn't see, because some of them would see things. I never did. Some of them would hear things, not with their ears, but in their mind. I never did. I would just blurt out things. And it would be, not always, but often it would be profound to the person. It just would come out. And so I ran that by our instructor one day and I said, Heather, I know what you're saying and I understand why you're saying that you need to ask for permission. But I said, I don't get that opportunity to even realize it until after I've verbalized it. Then I realize, wow, where'd that come from? You know? And so I'd often think, I've never said that before. Like, where did that information come from? And then I'm thinking, this is interesting. I'm learning to be an intuitive life coach. And I didn't think I was intuitive at all. But now here I am, not a lot, but as needed, these blurts would just come out of information that I've never thought of before. Or maybe I was losing my memory. Maybe I'd heard it 10 times before, but I'd forgotten that I'd even heard it. I don't know, but it didn't matter. So it was just this, because how information comes through for me is claircognizance. I just know things. Because my boys will say to me sometimes, Dad, how do you know that? Like, what podcast did you get that off? What ebook? Where did you read that? And I'm like, uh, yeah, I don't know. I just know it. And they go, yeah, but you have to have, they want a reference for it. And I'm like, go to the universe and find out where it came from. I don't know. It's just, it's there. It was in the ether and just, it latched on and I verbalized it. I was game to act. Like you said earlier, in this lifetime, you've decided you're going to say it, speak it, read it, sing it, whatever. Yeah, so things come out like that, and that's sort of how it runs for me. But I mean, I'm not blurting stuff out all the time. I'm sitting there like a normal coach, nodding and agreeing and trying. And then when they say something pertinent that just will jump out at you, you'd be like, you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned this. Like, let's just go back to that because that seems very interesting right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you sound exactly like my mom and my twin who are claircognizant. And I'm not. That's not my clair. And so I never actually talked about it on my podcast until my mom, she's like my biggest fan. And she's like, well, you never talk about claircognizance. I'm like, yeah, that's not how I live. I'm more clairaudient. I'm very much like hear the message. And it sounds like your intuitive coaching is more like almost like this intuitive channeling of just these divine messages and kind of trusting that whatever you say is going to have impact. And I feel like when I do coaching, I call it, but yeah, people are like, well, what kind of coaching? I'm like, I have no idea because every guest shows up with a different energy, a different issue. So I feel like sometimes I just prescribe books. I'm just like, I get a download of like, you need to read this book. And it's always different. It's different books. It's never like a list of 10 that I know. It's like I get an intuitive hit and they're like, okay, they take it seriously. They read that book and there was something in that book that completely shifted their mindset, shifted their life for any aspect of the wellness wheel. I'm not just only on spirituality. It's like, hey, let's look at finances. Let's look at physical. Let's look wherever. And so I just love coaching so much because it brings me into the present moment with another human going, I have no idea what's going to happen. And I'm really good at matching people's energy. Some people, they have such a sweetness and I intuitively feel they need to be spoken to with such gentleness and compassion and grace. And I almost whisper to them. I literally notice myself whispering. My voice has to be very sweet and gentle. And other people, I feel like I'm Tony Robbins and I'm swearing and I'm rough. And some people, I feel like their mind needs, and I ask them permission, of course, obviously. I go, hey, what level of coaching do you want today? Level 1 or level 10? And I'm like, level 1, I'll be your biggest cheerleader. Level 10, you'll cry. And everyone's like, yeah, you're not going to make me cry. Like, I want level 10. And like, literally within 3 minutes, I have them crying. And it's not bad. It's like wonderful. There's a release. But for me, it's so obvious. Like, we're all blind. We have all these blind spots, shadows and blinds. We all do, That's why I think everyone needs a coach. I'm like, when people come to my retreats, I had one guest. He's actually one of my biggest supporters too. He's come 3 times to my retreats. And he's like, he's great. He's like, JD, I reflect back on my year and I think, like, what are the highlights of my year? What am I most proud of? And it was when I went to your retreats. He goes, at your retreat, I just, I have a quiet home by a lake, simple food, hiking in the forest, some coaching every day, very like basic things. He goes, at your retreats, he goes, it feels like we're doing nothing. But then I go home and my entire life changes. I'm like, yes. And we come and we have no idea what's going to come about. He's like, I want to come for this issue. And then in coaching, I'm like, let's look at that issue. And it's like something so unexpected. And I call that intuitive coaching. It's just like, hey, let's just see what shows up and what needs to come through. And I trust that I'm connected to, I don't know, my higher self, their higher self. We're collaborating somehow to just create a healing, create an awareness and a healing. And if sometimes that's a cathartic cry, sometimes that's an aha moment, sometimes that's a book, sometimes that's a reframing of a past trauma, even though I'm not a therapist, everyone knows that. But like, I really do love this intuitive coaching. And I
Mhm.
think, yeah.
Yeah.
I,
And I love it. Like sometimes when I'll blurt stuff out like that, I'll put it into an analogy. Like I'll just because I find for myself to understand things, I need to dumb things down to how I think. So often I'll try and just and I know I've been on the phone to my son and he's in the finance industry and he's got a couple of dozen staff under him who report directly to him. He's extremely busy. He loves the chaos of the whole thing. And he'll sort of say something and I'll just giggle and I'll go, that sounds like da 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 da. And he'll go, wow, where did you hear that? And I go, I don't know, just never heard it before. I just made it. And he's like, that just makes so sense. He goes, oh, I've got to go and tell my boss that. That's hilarious because I'm virtual. Sometimes I'm making fun of what they're doing with an analogy to make him realize that's that's actually a bit we are overworking where we're just that is a bit dumb like but just through and it's an intuitive analogy that just comes through that just opens up something that before everyone's got the blinkers on can't see what's really going on and it's like oh yeah gee we're probably spending way too much energy on that yeah.
Yeah, and these are these small daily awakenings that you're helping people shift. Like, just a perception shift can change really everything, the trajectory of someone's life. And so, are your sons more tapped into intuition now? Are they conscious of their intuition and their intuitive, yeah, guidance?
Only because I'm constantly talking about it. My youngest is 24, and he keeps going, "Yeah, Dad." He's trying to help me with things with marketing and do this, that, and the other because he does social media. Like if you bought a new product and you wanted to market it and say it retailed for between $20 and $300, and you wanted some social media ads, you would send him the product. He would take it and he'd hand it to half a dozen people with a bit of a script and he'd video them and put it all together. So he's always trying to help me market things and do stuff. And he'll often say, I'm still trying to get this intuition thing, Dad. Like I know what you're saying is right and all that, but they're still trying to grasp it. And then the oldest is 39, and he's got it a little bit more. And it's funny because one of the synchronistic moments I mentioned before that like was just profound, very much involved him, and where we had our whole family had a major for the good life-changing event occur and so I sort of say to him well you were involved there you are obviously led by your intuition to do what you did and what you did was a very synchronistic moment for me that soon as you started to talk about this weird, unusual idea you had, that was the second tick in the box for the synchronicity, like in 2 days. And I just stopped him pretty early on in his big description of what he was thinking we should do. And I said, mate, I'm already on board. And he's like, wow, why? And I said, no. I said, you now have the job of convincing your mother because she's going to take the idea from you for this massive change a lot better than she will from me. And so he came back 3 hours later and he goes, I convinced her. So yeah, so my boys do, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't badger them with it, but because it's forefront in my mind when we have conversations about things, and I'll say, yeah, look, see, that was your intuition, like, yeah, and they're
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, Dad, okay, yep.
And just
So
celebrating it. Can you imagine if all fathers celebrate their children's intuition? It's not whether you're a boy or a girl. Like me at 24, I had zero confidence in my intuition. And I always tell people that I was always paying psychics and paying people, oh no, do readings. And they're like, no, 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 you're intuitive. And I didn't trust myself. For me, it's an age thing and a confidence thing. And me now, 40, I have that confidence. But it takes time, and it takes these celebrations and these wins and encouragement by society, because where society is so focused on the logical mind instead of living from the heart. And so your work is so important. And just what you said about men in this quiet desperation, I want to talk more. Like I want to do a whole podcast on that, really, like this quiet desperation, like in you being in men's circles and knowing your father. Can you kind of quickly almost summarize what is that quiet desperation that men are collectively living right now?
well, like some of the guys I've had, like a guy I interviewed yesterday, like this time yesterday, I'm interviewing a guy, and he's like had been suicidal like multiple times in his life, and it's only like in 2019 he started to get his life back together. And actually, there's quite a few guys I've had that in the group who in the past have been suicidal through different circumstances, and they're your mess is your message. That they got into their mess and now that's their message. They've come out of it and that sort of thing. And so look, I honestly know too, some of the guys come to the group, and I don't think they realize this, but it's my opinion, my intuitive opinion, that some of them come for companionship, like because they're lonely. And some of the guys, let's say half of them are married, half are single, and and it could be either of them. But I occasionally get that little intuitive hit that some of these guys are here just straight up for someone to talk to, and or to sit and listen and just be around other men like that, because you know like my dad, once his hearing started to go, he didn't, before that, he didn't have many friends, hardly really at all. He was a hard blue collar worker. He would leave home about 5:30 in the morning, go to the rock crushing quarry where he worked. We think that was what really took his hearing away, like a lot of ridiculously loud machinery and that sort of stuff. Um, and yeah, it just worked. And he'd come home, he'd mow the lawn, prune his fruit trees. The yard was always pristine, you know. But that was it. And then he'd just sit under the house and drink beer. And then eventually, after many years, that went into rum. He'd just sit there and drink a bottle of rum in a day once he retired at 70. And it's just because he had no one to talk to.
Mm.
And even if he wanted to talk to people, his hearing had gone and he couldn't understand people. And it just, um, yeah, so it's just not a nice way to go. He couldn't see his disability of not being able to hear as, he couldn't see past that. So he just isolated himself. And we talked before about Alvin. For those who are listening, who's Alvin? Alvin's a thalidomide baby. He was born with no arms. At 5 days old, his birth parents put him up for adoption. Like he could have easily, and if you listen to the podcast I've just put out, like if you listen to the first 5 minutes of it, it's the men's group, and it's don't take things personally. I've got Alvin on for the first, like I've cut him out of the middle of the podcast and I've put it on at the beginning, and him coming on telling a story of when he was 14. He's at a burger joint with his dad and there's a man staring at him. And like he says, I get it's gross. I eat with my toes. So he goes, I got my burger between my toes and I've got it up to my mouth eating it. And there's a guy across the room staring at me. And he had a big hissy fit when they got home about that with his dad. And um, but so he could, and one of his solutions his dad said to him is, well, son, if you want, because they were down in the base, he'd stormed off down to the basement. And he said, if you want, you can just live here in the basement for the rest of your life. Your mum can throw some toast down to you every couple of days so you don't starve. There's a bathroom down here. If you don't want people staring at you, you don't want this all happening, just stay here, isolate yourself from the world. But he realized that wasn't a solution. And his dad said to him, the only way to educate people is to get out there and get amongst them. And that's what he's been doing now for the last, well, he's 65 now. And he's been doing this. I think he's been public speaking since he was about 20. And,
I know. I saw him when I was in high school. Or no, not even high school. Sorry. When I was in elementary school, I saw him. He came. He was a inspirational speaker, motivational speaker. He played the drums. We were all amazed. And I grew up hanging out with him. And I wasn't expecting to talk about him so much, but like I finished his book, which I absolutely loved. I cried so many times in it, which means it really had impact for me. And I want to just acknowledge it because we're bringing him up, which is for any of the listeners, Alvin's Laws of Life, 5 Steps to Successfully Overcome Anything. And it's really inspirational book. I'm thinking about kind of all the men that I want to come on your podcast, but really just to be in your invite only men's circle, because it's a pandemic of quiet desperation, and you're on such a mission, Doug. And, is there any kind of last message that you would like to share with the listeners today?
Well, I guess for the men listening, the ladies, take this as you will. Just have the courage to step out there. And if you think, I don't know, I mean, obviously men listening to this are going to be on the intuition path a bit. It's not basics here, but just have the courage to trust what's going on, the messages coming through. Have the guts to believe that there is benevolent forces out there who love you and who want the best for you, and who will and are constantly getting messages to you. Be open to those messages, have the guts to follow them, particularly if synchronicities come along. You see the same thing happening twice in a short time period, and you're thinking, wow, this is unusual. Have the courage to follow through with it and watch your life change for the better. And obviously, and sometimes the changes aren't always obvious immediately, but as time goes on, you'll start to see it. Yeah. Thank you.
It's a perfect word, courage. It takes a lot of courage to follow intuition, because it's fighting. It's a fight against the ego and a fight against the logic. And it takes time to build that trust and that muscle to have courage to walk this intuitive path for anyone, women and men. But it's not just for women. Intuition is for all of us here on earth. So how can people find you?
Go to the podcast, Intuitive Conversations with Doug. It's on YouTube. It's on all the other platforms, that sort of thing. That's the main way to, I've got other sort of different marketing things in that, but just listen to the podcast, because most of the time I'm not talking, I'm interviewing people. Some of them it's just me, but most of the time I've got really interesting guests on, and just tap into the podcast.
Nice. So I can't wait to listen to some more of your episodes. So thank you again, Doug, for your time today, and hope we can stay in touch.
Yep. Thanks, JD. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.